I talked with the founder of one of the many grassroots efforts underway in New Orleans, and she says too few police is part of the equation, only part of it. She's an attorney who has worked with law enforcement and first responders her whole career. She's also regarded as one of the most successful prosecutors to ever work in Orleans Parish. Laura Canizero Rodrigue is a leader of one of the grassroots groups in New Orleans. There are many, but it's the Bayou Mama Bears. You can see it on Instagram and Facebook. And what you guys are doing is trying to make people accountable for what's happening and educating people. Are you noticing reaction from people?
You know, the reaction to the group and the posts has been somewhat overwhelming. You know, it's a group of women who came together and really out of a fear in a large sense, because women were becoming the majority of victims of carjackings. And it started to scare people. You know, we weren't just getting carjacked at 2 a.m. in dark alleys. It was at 9 a.m. at Costco. It was, you know, in mid-city in broad daylight when Miss Linda Fricky gets her arm ripped off. You know, leaving her insurance job. Those things really started to scare citizens, and women started coming together saying, okay, you know, how do we protect ourselves? What is the next step here? Do we have to move out of the city where we are born and raised, and those sorts of things? So that's what fueled sort of the momentum of the group, and there has been a huge movement behind this because people are coming together saying, we want to be educated. We want to know what's necessary to make the change, and we want to know what's causing the problem.
Well, one thing you hear over and over is a crime was committed, people call the police, and they basically don't show up for hours and hours. There are way too few police on the force. Right. How can that change?
So the police department, you know, I like to say that they have been set up to fail. Essentially, you know, one of the analogies somebody said was it's if you cut off somebody's leg and then tell them, go run a marathon, but just do your best. Whatever you can, just give it your best. And, you know, they really do not have the resources to man this type of crime wave. One of the things we've talked about in the group is how the federal consent decree that started, you know, we're 10 years ago or so now, that the city pays about $150,000 a month to fund. It's about time for that to come to an end. And NOPD, they need to take the handcuffs off the police, essentially. Let them be proactive in policing. You know, let them sort of be able to do their jobs without fearing that they're going to be accused of something. They have already met the legal standard that was required at the beginning. And this is a sort of a complicated issue. It's hard to educate people on all the nuances of a consent decree, but essentially it's already been determined that they have met the constitutional standards of the department. So we're saying, okay, now let NOPD do their job to some extent. So we are seeing, you know, very, very long response times. We're seeing citizens have to collect their own evidence now.
Collect their own evidence,
I mean, really, that's
more than 4,000 car thefts last year, and the new year has not started off any better. One of the things that you have addressed lately in your posts is leadership.
If anything is to come of this group, it's really to get people out there to vote so that our leadership is a reflection of what we hope is the future of our city. On a really good day in New Orleans, we have about 30% of our city turning out to vote, which should be shocking because we're the murder capital of the country. So, you know, people should be really invested. Do you want to stay here, or do you feel like you're going to have to sell your house and get out? You know, we should have certainly more than 30% of our residents invested in the future of the city. And the leadership has been the biggest indicator of where our crime is going, because we had a major shift in leadership in 2019 and in 2020 in New Orleans, and we are suffering major consequences as a result of that.
And in 2019, there were 119 murders in New Orleans.
Correct.
Last year, about 280.
That's right. So in 2016, we started to see a steady decline of murders. You know, I think it started around 174 in 2016, inching down and down every year until 2019. In 2020, we elected a progressive DA, that's Jason Williams, and not only that, but one thing that kind of flies under the radar that people forget about is our criminal court judges. About 50% of our bench flipped. That means about half of the criminal court judges were newly elected, and we saw a lot of what we call progressive or more liberal on crime judges get elected to that bench. what that results in is lower bonds or a release of offenders when they're brought in or brought before the judge with a crime pending. So obviously that allows them to return to the street to commit crime.
Right.
So that major shift in leadership, we can start to study those numbers now. What has happened? What is the result of this shift in Orleans Parish?
Mardi Gras has begun, the season has begun, and this weekend Miss Universe will be broadcast worldwide from New Orleans. And there was concern about some of the contestants. I talked with the Lieutenant Governor a month ago. They contacted him saying, we want to make sure our girls are safe. Can you imagine that?
Well, it's embarrassing. In any other time, we would be so proud to be hosting this event. It's certainly such an amazing event for women,
Sure.
and families would be happy to participate. Now, I do not see how they guarantee the safety of the people traveling here, and not only that, but the residents who may be affected by gunfire. One of the things when I was asked about the Miss Universe pageant coming here, I said something, and it makes people kind of step back a little bit, but I am a numbers person. I like to see numbers and show me what's actually happening. And I said, you are statistically more likely, the candidates are statistically more likely to leave in a casket than with the crown. And that's a horrifying idea, but the reality is at the rate we're going of shootings, and we're in mass shootings now. It's not just one shooting here, one shooting there. In fact, they're having a hard time identifying which bodies go to which gunshot. The whole idea, and from being a prosecutor for a long time, each person comes into the criminal justice system at different phases, whether they're a first-time offender, and we have a chance then to either give them the tools to make a change in their life,
to rehabilitate
them, and that's the most important time when we can sort of get involved in somebody's life in the criminal justice system. So for us just to catch and release without helping that person.
I gather that's not happening. The rehabilitation is not even on the books.
Right, because there's the sentiment, just release them back, and that's sort of been the idea. But that is not working, and really we're doing a disservice to the people who are apprehended as well. This is a chance to give them an opportunity to get some help that they wouldn't have had before. Get some resources, get some job training to give them options as opposed to what the street may offer them as a source of income.
This conversation will continue for a long time to come. What can you leave us with today?
I think that the most important thing now is for people in Louisiana, and New Orleans is certainly, the hot spot there. We see heavy crime in Baton Rouge and in Shreveport also, but people throughout the state need to start educating themselves, whether it's through finding these grassroots groups that are really saying enough is enough. Mm-hmm. We're going to start informing each other, and we're going to pay close attention to leadership. What are they really saying, and what does that mean? What does it translate into? Things sound great on a political campaign, when you're out there talking about change, but what does it translate into? And what have we seen it translate into, especially in New Orleans? Is it working, or do we need to shift that leadership?
We will see. Thank you so much.
Thank
Laura.
you.